right. Well, today I'm here with Bruce Harkey, the president and CEO of the Franklin Park Conservatory. Bruce, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great. How are you, Chris?
Awesome. Well, I'm very excited to have you on the show. You're with the Franklin Park Conservatory. Could you start by possibly telling me a little bit about yourself, how you got here, and then maybe tell me a little bit about the conservatory itself?
Sure. So I've been working since I was 15 years old. I started working in greenhouses in a florist in Detroit, Michigan, and then went to Michigan State to study horticulture. And through different experiences, I ended up with a business degree as well as a horticulture degree and worked for Honda for 18 years. And after 18 years, that wasn't the plan. The plan was to work like 5 years in business and then start a landscape company or something. And I just wondered, what happened to my horticulture career. And I heard through a friend that the CEO position was open at the conservatory and they were looking for business, horticulture, and nonprofit. And I had spent some time on the board of several nonprofits in Columbus, a theater company and Kappa. And I applied for the position and got the job. That was 15 years ago. So my goal is to work longer in horticulture than I did working for Honda in Japan and in Ohio. But it's been just a great journey. And the conservatory is one of the top 15 botanical gardens in the United States by budget size. So we're not the largest in terms of acreage, but we are one of the top gardens, and we continue to grow as we implement our long-term plans.
Outstanding. So you're here in Columbus, Ohio, very near and dear to my heart. That's actually where I'm located. My kids and I go to the Franklin Park Conservatory all the time.
Thank you.
So tell me a little bit about the conservatory itself. So what does your business look like? I realize you're a nonprofit, but what are the features and what do you have there at the conservatory?
Sure. So the anchor of the conservatory is the historic John F. Wolfe Palm House, which was built in 1895. It's one of 5 glass houses dating back to the Victorian era. And adjacent to that is the Dorothy M. Davis Show House, which was also built in the late 1800s. So one of the big projects we have planned for the future is to do a full restoration of those facilities to bring them up to the modern age, to really enhance the palm and the plant collection with a focus on environmental sustainability and educating people about some of these rare and endangered plants. So that's sort of the foundation. And then there was an event in 1992 called Ameriflora, and there was about a $14 million expansion. So surrounding that area, there was an atrium that was built, and then what we call biomes, which are different glass vignettes from around the world. So we have a Pacific Island water garden, and we have a desert and a rainforest and a Himalayan biome. So that was the conservatory when I first started back in 2007. And since then, we've completed 10 capital projects to grow and expand the conservatory. And some of the really interesting areas that I think the public would know about, people who are tourists or visitors, are the Wells Barn. Yeah, we took a 200-year-old timber frame that was 4,000 square feet from Ohio, and we turned that into a 12,000 square foot events facility, as well as an education facility. We built a 4-acre community garden campus, which is the intersection of landscape architecture and edible foods. The Scotts Miracle-Gro Foundation Children's Garden opened in 2018, and that's been a game changer. Our membership grew from 8,000 households to 12,000 households within a number of months. And then at the same time, we enclosed part of our property because we had such a small footprint, only about 3 acres. And that's allowed us to do major exhibitions like topiaries and train exhibitions by an artist named Paul Bussey, Pumpkins Aglow in October, and now Conservatory Aglow, which is just amazing. So really focused on the visitor experience, but we also have a significant, from an earned revenue viewpoint, event sales and catering business. The catering's on hold because of COVID, but we do several $1 million worth of business. And when I started the conservatory, our budget was about $5 million. And with COVID, we dropped to 7, but we'll be back to about 12.3 next year, even without the catering business. So we have the whole tourism piece, we have the events piece, and then one of the most important pieces is all of our community outreach and education, which provides access to the conservatory and lots of educational programs for the underserved, because we're committed to making sure everyone has this great experience in our community.
That's outstanding. That's definitely a lot going on. So, you mentioned that your revenue dipped. So what was your experience like during the pandemic there at the conservatory?
I mean, like many people, it's just sort of mind numbing. I was in California on vacation, and the city of Columbus canceled the Arnold because of this thing called COVID that we were all starting to hear about. And we thought everyone would close during spring break and then we would reopen. I don't think anyone had any idea. And what we realized very quickly, I started having regular phone calls with my board. I flew back early because we decided, of course, to close for 3 weeks. We had to cancel people's weddings and cancel other events that were happening at the conservatory. And then after sitting down with my team and reviewing what was happening in the environment, we decided that it was in our best interest to close not just through the end of March, but we announced that we were going to be closed through the end of May. And I think people thought we were crazy. They thought we were being overly conservative. At the end of the day, we know how it all played out. We were not allowed to reopen until June 10th of 2020. So it was a tough period of time. We had to cut our budget from 12 million down to 7 million. We had to do some significant layoffs. We had to cut back a lot of programming and then adjust to the new reality, which were all the safety protocols related to COVID.
And now you're kind of positioned well to rebound. I mean, you're an outdoor facility with obviously indoor elements. But talk to me about how business is going now. I mean, you said you're on the upswing. You're looking to get back to over $12 million. What does business look like for you right now?
Well, I'll use the month of October as an example. So back in 2018, the conservatory, we had our regular fall harvest blooms exhibition with pumpkins and chrysanthemums and whatnot. And then after we were able to enclose part of our property, we started something called Pumpkins Aglow. And Pumpkins Aglow are hundreds of pumpkins that are carved and throughout the conservatory, both inside and outside. And we have a pumpkin house and just a great festival atmosphere, food trucks, kettle corn. And so in 2018, our revenue in October was about 65,000. For this year, we hit about 450,000. So you can see the dramatic impact that coming up with those creative exhibitions and experiences for visitors has had. And that's been the lifesaver for us. Had we not, made those decisions back in 2018 and we only had our inside spaces, we'd be in the same position as probably a lot of the performing arts organizations and whatnot. But because we had the outside experiences and we made investments in air filtration systems for the inside, people have felt very, very comfortable. And we're seeing double-digit increases in our attendance and membership.
That's outstanding. I mean, to see that kind of resurgence and that kind of growth, that's incredible. So congratulations to you and your team. So, obviously with that kind of resurgence, you're now dealing with the same thing that everybody else out there is, right? Which is you have a bunch of business and you're having a hard time finding people to service that business.
Yes,
yes. So what does staffing look like where you are right now? How is that national conversation impacting you?
Yeah, it's really tough because we went from 100 full-time in 2020 down to 65 and then 100 part-time down to 35. And we pretty much maintained that in 2021 because like every business, we had no idea how COVID would play out. We had our thoughts. We were right in some areas. We didn't predict Delta or a resurgence in the second half of 2021. So the entire leadership team was very, very cautious about adding additional resources. And then when we did, especially in areas like the food service business, trying to find cooks and bartenders, we really hit a wall. And it was difficult to find people. But we have a really small team that is doing just a tremendous job of making sure that everything looks beautiful, the plants are amazing, the displays are incredible, and we provide great service to our visitors as well as our event guests. For 2021, in our budget, we'll be up another 18 full-time positions. But the question, of course, remains, will we be able to find the people we need? And I think for the conservatory, it's all about making sure that we're one of the best places for people to work so that we can compete effectively against for-profit businesses.
That's a great point. So, when you and I were talking earlier, I mean, obviously you're a nonprofit. You can't compete with the $22 an hour, dishwashers that are out there, or some of the other high paying hourly roles out there, but you are finding other unique ways to be able to incentivize people to come work for you. So what are some of the unique things about your property or some of the unique benefits that have attracted people to come work for you?
Well, I worked, as I mentioned, I worked for Honda for 18 years, great company, worked in manufacturing, in management positions, but it's a different environment. So imagine going from that environment to walking around the conservatory through the palm house and amazing collections of palms. We have Dale Chihuly art glass, and we have the largest collection in the botanical garden world. That's on display, ever-changing exhibitions, and just a great team of people. So I think it's a wonderful place to work. It really speaks to people's hearts, and the fact that we have community days once a month where we make sure that everyone has access to the conservatory. We have a major community gardening program. I think people are looking for more than just a wage. They're looking for a career. They're looking for a great place to work. And they're looking for a place that feeds their soul, that gives them some meaning in addition to a paycheck. And we feel very strongly that we can be that place.
That's outstanding. And if you look at your career, I mean, I think you're positioned to shepherd people into that. I mean, you were 18 years with Honda, but you found your way back to horticulture. You found your way back to some of the things that you love. Is that journey something you feel like you can recreate for others? And how's that going?
Yeah, for me, it was really pretty amazing. The other thing that we didn't talk about is my father and mother on both sides, their grandparents came from Poland. So they were immigrants. And my mother's family settled in Detroit, which is my hometown. And my father's family actually settled in Ohio, west of West Virginia. My grandfather worked in the coal mines, and my grandmother washed the backs of the coal miners when they came out from their workday. And my father's family all moved to Detroit with the Detroit auto industry, except for one aunt who stayed in Canal, Winchester. And I always thought it was really interesting that I ended up in Ohio through the Japanese auto industry. So it's this really kind of bizarre circle that happened. But for me, it was just a great opportunity to move to Columbus. I had no idea what Columbus was like. I was in Tokyo, planning to move to Los Angeles, and my father passed away. So I moved to Columbus for what I thought would be a few years. I always describe Columbus as the Hotel California. You can check in, but you can never leave. And so I've lived in Columbus now longer than Detroit, longer than Tokyo, and it's an amazing city. And the opportunity to take virtually everything I've done in my career, whether it was business or retail or restaurants or nonprofit, plus horticulture, and bring it all together at the conservatory was just personally very rewarding. And the fact that we are able to continue growing. I'm not a maintenance guy, so I like new and exciting growth plans. And the fact that we have all of this amazing mission work really speaks to my heart and the value of education in moving people forward in their careers.
So, and that's a great segue to talk about your leaders, because, obviously a lot of people are very familiar with the, great resignation as it pertains to, people moving as far as talent goes. But you've got a pretty solid team of leaders there, and, they were with you through the pandemic. You've done a lot of great development. So what kind of things are you doing to keep your leaders engaged and continue to grow them?
Yeah, my philosophy of leadership has always been very servant leadership oriented, that, you find people who are really talented and give them the direction, but give them the free rein. So I mentioned in our earlier conversation, horticulture director who was here when I started back in 2007, and I saw in him an amazing project manager. And so I transitioned him from horticulture, which he had done his entire life, to running major capital projects, building buildings and building gardens. And we worked together on the first 5 projects. And then a few years later, we did more fundraising. We did 5 more projects. And it was pretty much him on his own. And then he's also taken on responsibility for budgeting and business planning and strategic planning. So to me, our responsibility as a leader is to see those skills in people and help nurture that and give them the autonomy to flourish. And I encourage them to do the same thing. We're already looking at that next level of associate directors and managers. Who are the people who will be sitting in these seats in 10 years? Because whether it's the board or the leadership team, we are committed to making sure that we leave the conservatory in a stronger place than we found it, and that growth will continue.
So when you're looking at all of these leaders and, you're trying to plan their growth, what kind of conversations are you having to get them involved or engaged in the conversation so that maybe they see a path that they didn't think was there for themselves, but that you see the potential for, getting them kind of towards that? What are those conversations like?
I think a lot of leaders are afraid of having those conversations with people. I'm very open. Over the course of 15 years, hundreds of people have gone through the conservatory at various levels. Fortunately, the leadership team has been very, very stable. And I know even with COVID, some people at the management level, they've been here for 10 years. They've never worked anywhere else. So I think, we're seeing a bit of attrition at that management level where people want to try something else. I've been fortunate that I can come to the conservatory with a depth of lots of experience from different places. And so I thank people for their outstanding service to the conservatory, and I wish them well. My boss at Honda said to me when I left to join the conservatory, he said, Mr. Nobe, he said, Bruce-san, don't forget that you have Honda's name on your back. In other words, if you fail, that's a black mark for Honda because you spent 18 years here and we didn't do a good job training you if you are not successful. But I have very open conversations with my leadership team, and I encourage them to do the same. What are your aspirations? A woman who was my former development director, she wanted to be the executive director of a nonprofit organization in the future. I said, well, Ellen, you need to get probably your MBA. You need to expand your scope beyond fundraising, and you probably need to go to other organizations. And she's now in Cleveland as the associate dean in one of the universities in Cleveland. And so she's been able to achieve that. And she was with the conservatory for over 10 years. So kudos to her. And you never know how these relationships will re-intersect. So I would rather be open about it and help work with people to make sure that I understand what their aspirations are. How can I help them achieve that, but at the same time advance the conservatory's priorities? And it's better than being surprised, right? I'd rather work with someone and know that they're thriving and flourishing and achieving their dreams, and they're doing a great job while they're here.
That's awesome. So, you've got these leaders that you're guiding, that you're molding. Sometimes, they know it's coming. Sometimes you're planning it for them and in bringing them along. That growth of leadership is a real responsibility for all of us now as we bring new people into this crazy field of hospitality that we're all kind of a part of. What kind of advice are you giving people as they're entering, their leadership experience to try to get them on the right track and start it off on the right foot?
I think it's mentoring them and showing them a good example. Like the leadership team, when we established a couple of business units back, I think in 2010, people were very focused on making sure their area thrived. And we've had to transition to, we're all in this together. So one thing that we're working on is a big ambitious project called the North Star. So what is the conservatory's position in this community in 25 years, not only in Columbus, but regionally? And how do we align ourselves with the community priorities? And so we're going to hire a firm to help us with that process. So they'll all be involved in that because I want them, if they're a young leader, to be involved in articulating the future that they will have to implement. And so that's important. I think making sure that they work across the organization and understand what other people are doing in their roles. We don't want people to be siloed. And then thirdly, I would say recognizing the importance of ensuring that everyone feels welcome at the conservatory, that they can see themselves in the board and in the guests and in the staff. And that focus on diversity, equity, and inclusion is absolutely critical. And we've been working on it for years, but it's also good business. When you look at the millennial generation, 57% of millennials, if I'm remembering the percentage correctly, are non-white. So I'm coming from the auto industry too. I use the Cadillac example. Cadillac would not exist as a company if they didn't evolve to make sure that the product they were offering met the market needs. And we are very committed to making sure that through art exhibitions, for example, that we represent all the people who are part of Columbus. So I think those are some of the priorities, is respecting the need for diversity, equity, and inclusion, and a great guest experience, and being visionary and working across the different organizational lines to make sure that you're an effective leader.
Awesome. Now, if you're talking to somebody who's just in the workforce in general, do you have a piece of advice for them, something that was given to you or something that you practice that you think would be beneficial at this point?
Yeah, I think I would say from my experience, because my experience has been a little different than the average person probably, is number one, be flexible. Be flexible in where your career goes. I think sometimes people graduate and think, oh, well, I'm going to do this for the rest of my life. And in certain cases, if you want to be a lawyer, yeah, maybe you will be a lawyer. But I would say that's a great example. You can be a lawyer, and then that can be a foundation for working in a corporation. You might end up in an HR position in a corporation, and you have a law background. So I think having a solid foundation somewhere is really important. And then secondly, being flexible and thinking out of the box and letting your career evolve naturally. You just never know what's going to pique your interest. Like I love tourism, and I had the great pleasure of hosting a conference for some of my public garden leaders for the biggest gardens in the country. It's called the Directors of Large Gardens. And I said, well, I'll host a meeting in Palm Springs in 2015. Well, through that experience, I met the Convention and Visitors Bureau. I eventually ended up on the board of Experience Columbus here. And I'm already thinking like that would be a really great retirement gig, be in Palm Springs, work for the Convention and Visitors Bureau and promote, that industry. I'm doing a tour to Japan with Ohio State University with some of their donors in 2022. That's something that just came up naturally. Someone said, hey, can you help me with this trip? And it's kind of piqued my interest. So I think life's an adventure, and you want to look back and say, wow, I've met some really great people. I've done some interesting things, and I've learned, and I've found my purpose. So that's my advice.
It's outstanding. Well, Bruce, you've got an amazing facility. It sounds like you've built an amazing business. You've got a great leadership team, and I can see why. I thank you for spending just a few minutes with me, giving us some insights and sharing with us. So thank you very much.
Pleasure. Thank you, Chris.